Problem with masking is the neurotypical world sees that you're able to mask and thinks, why don't you just keep doing that? This is the Apparently Autistic podcast,
where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway
and Bridget Holloway,
and I am Apparently Autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. All right, welcome to another episode of the Apparently Autistic podcast, episode 4.
Already.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I'm Keith Holloway.
And I'm Bridget.
And this week we are going to be talking about autistic masking.
Yes.
So...
just to jump right in.
Yep.
Masking is a strategy used by some autistic people, consciously or unconsciously, to appear non-autistic in order to blend and be more accepted in society. Masking can happen in formal situations, such as in school or work, or informal situations, such as home with family or socializing with friends. Some autistics describe masking as hypervigilance for constant adaptation to the preferences and expectations, whether expressed, implied, or anticipated, of the people around you. Tightly controlling and adjusting how you express yourself, including your needs, preferences, opinions, interests, personality, mannerisms, and appearance, based on the real or anticipated reactions of others, both in the moment and over time. So that's from the National Autistic Society. I believe you said that was from
the UK.
From the UK?
Yeah, so,
okay.
They have a lot of good stuff online. So.
Yeah.
So some general examples to help people understand if they still aren't clear. You might use facial expressions, perhaps mirroring other people's facial expressions that wouldn't come naturally to you.
Yeah.
Forcing yourself to make eye contact or monitoring how much eye contact you're making. If you're thinking, am I making too much eye contact? That's definitely part of it. Yeah. Changing speech or tone of voice. For example, using less direct phrasing or being more or less animated.
Yeah.
I think we kind of talked about that. Suppressing, reducing, or hiding stimming. Such as hand flapping or echolalia. Have we talked about echolalia yet?
No, we haven't.
We can maybe. Echolalia is basically just repeating words or sounds that for some reason you find interesting or comforting or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you might switch to less noticeable stims, such as playing with a pen. I definitely would do stuff like that.
Yeah.
You want to continue with some of these examples?
Reducing visible reactions to sensory sensitivities, like if you're shaking someone's hand, maybe you're sensitive to touch, but you reach out and shake someone's hand and you're able to mask and not like either pull back or wince or flinch. Yeah. Planning in advance what you want to say to somebody, like scripting a conversation. And in some situations, you may be able to adapt if it doesn't go the way that you scripted it, or in some situations, you're not able to.
Yeah.
Asking more questions than you might be comfortable with or interested in, just to try to blend in with what you think is normal. Not sharing interests due to a concern that they may be perceived as inappropriate or unusual. For example, due to a person's age, like a special interest that you might think is like juvenile for your age group. So you wouldn't share that with people in public.
Right.
You want to do some?
Sure. And then really the last one of the examples, mirroring dress, sense, and other elements of appearance. So basically like styling your appearance after what you think is socially acceptable versus what you're comfortable with or what's your own style.
Yeah.
So what does or did masking look like for me? I've been thinking about this. This is still one issue that I'm working on, trying to figure out my masking. One thing that I know for sure was masking was just acting more okay with a lot of overwhelming situations than I was. And I'm changing that. It comes off almost as regression. because this is one of those things we touched on, I think, in a previous episode, and may have even been edited out. But with masking, the problem with masking is the neurotypical world sees that you're able to mask and thinks, why don't you just keep doing that?
Yeah.
Why can't you just keep masking? And like, just because someone can mask does not mean that it's comfortable. It does not mean that they should. It's exhausting. So
It's like constantly putting on a show. Like, imagine being like your everyday life, being on a stage, presenting a show to everybody. Like, it's scripted. It's what you think everybody wants to see. It's like you're putting in this effort to do things by the book all day, every day. And I can see how that would be exhausting.
Yep. So yeah, it's not okay for you to expect a neurodivergent person to keep masking. Sometimes we may choose to continue to mask in certain situations. And sometimes we're not even aware we're still masking in certain situations. But yeah, so when it comes to like overstimulating situations now, I know it's okay for me to just either avoid it or try to deal with it in whatever way that I need to. And, you know, we've given some examples of that, like shopping.
Yeah.
We don't even do a full shopping trip at the store anymore. We just order from Walmart Plus and have it delivered. If we do need to run and do a quick shopping trip, then if it's going a little long, I'll just stay in the truck or go sit in the truck or whatever. I know I used to really try at small talk. That's what it is. See, I hate it so much I can't even think of it. Yeah, I used to really try it at small talk, and that's where scripting definitely came in. I have like a whole list of standard small talk phrases that people say that you can throw out there, and everyone just thinks like that's just normal small talk. And I even still do that sometimes. If I'm just like in passing with someone, hey, how are you doing? I'm here, or living the dream, or, you know, the dumb little phrases that people will respond with because they don't actually want to know how you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, like there's an extra curveball thrown in there from your years working in the fire department, because I know that my years of working in emergency services, small talk is hard for me because not everybody relates on the same level to what you start to perceive as normal. So on top of the autistic struggles that you have in the masking, you also have that experience and that exposure to stuff that most people don't see as normal, and that's normal to you. So you kind of even have to separate it further.
Well, and I think like that became especially noticeable to me when I started working outside of emergency services. Because in the fire department, in 911, whatever you're doing in emergency services, most of your talk is not small talk.
No.
You know, it's telling war stories, as they call it, you know, talking about crazy calls you've been on, or other things. There's very little real small talk in that.
To other people that can relate and have had exposure to those things, so it's not like total shocker to them when you say something that, But
then, when I started working, especially when I started working as a dispatcher, an aircraft dispatcher, that was when I realized that I have very little in common with a lot of the people that I was working with. Not that they were bad people at all or anything.
Just different life experience.
Yeah, completely different life experience, completely different frame of reference. That still comes up because like at work, something will happen and people will think it's a big deal. Like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's safe. No one's dying. It's like you said you started telling people at your work, nothing's on fire, nobody's dying. Like, we're good.
We're good.
One of my coworkers always goes around and checks how everyone's doing, and I'm always like, nope, I'm fine. He's like, oh, Keith's fine.
Like, are you ever not fine?
Right.
Not really. I mean, in this context.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What are some other ways that like I said, I'm still working on fleshing this out, trying to understand what are masks, what are part of my personality, what are things that maybe even started out as masks but are just now like permanently a part of how I interact with the world. What do you think? What are some masks that,
I don't know.
some
I'm
ways that you
I'm
think
still
I
trying
mask?
to figure it out too because this was one of my big fears when we first realized that autism is what we were dealing with is, like I wouldn't want to ask you to mask and put in that extra effort. I want you to just be authentically who you are. But we didn't really know what that was. So it was like, is that going to turn into I don't really even know this person and it hasn't been that way. I think you have unmasked to a certain extent at home for many years.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been
Yeah, I was
any
going to
kind of
say,
crazy shock.
I think even before we knew I had autism,
Yeah.
um, I was unconsciously unmasking at home.
Yeah.
Because I've always known too that I have different sides of me depending on the situation. And
Yeah.
knowing that that's masking now,
Well, and it's
makes it make
interesting because I
sense.
was thinking about that when I was reading over the notes for this episode, and it's very interesting to me because in social situations, large groups of people, there's a lot of masking going on, and
Hmm.
for you especially. And oftentimes we kind of avoid those situations, not intentionally, like we'd like to participate in those situations, but sometimes it's just not worth all of that.
Yeah.
But we have participated in things like that over the years. And then I think about situations with my family and those group gatherings, and you don't seem exhausted by that. You don't seem like it's
No.
putting on a show or masking in those situations. When my dad passed away, that was high alert for everybody, and you were so great for support and just there every step of the way and helping with the kids and helping with the arrangements and everything. Just like
Hmm.
all of the guys chipped in and helped a lot while me and my sisters put together arrangements and did everything we needed to do. And that didn't seem like masking to me.
Yeah.
So it's like those aren't situations that come naturally to me, but around certain people and in certain situations, it's not like it's extra hard for you
Yeah.
either. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's a good example of like one type of behavior is not necessarily always masking.
Mhm.
And I think in the example you're talking about, it has to do with how comfortable you are with people,
Yeah.
how safe you feel around people. I felt safe around you almost immediately and never had a reason to not feel safe around you. So that's why you probably realized that you were getting pretty much the genuine version of me anyways,
Yeah.
for the most part. And it's the same around your family. Like
Yeah.
I've always felt comfortable and safe around them. And sometimes that means when we're visiting them, I'm just sitting there quietly. But
Yeah.
everyone just kind of understands that. I
Yeah.
don't get judgment. I don't get anything like that. And, when they do engage me in conversation, I have no problem having a
Yeah.
conversation and talking with them about stuff. So,
Right.
but yeah, I think it has a lot to do um, with how safe someone feels. So if you have someone in your life that's autistic, and you can recognize that they don't mask around you as much, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's a sign of trust. That's a sign of feeling safe for sure.
Yeah.
Probably, speaking of that, one of my biggest masks, and it was something you jokingly apologized for getting on camera, is just like my outward, like hard persona, like
Mhm.
I try to put on a lot more of a tougher persona, and I think that's more just a defense mechanism than anything.
Yeah, for
But it's
sure.
definitely a mask.
Yeah.
And like you and the boys have said that, you can see through that, obviously.
Right. I think the safety in it is a big piece, and I think that another piece of it that at least with you, I can't speak for all autistics, and it may not be consistent across the board, but one thing I've noticed that even when you're masking, you're still genuine. It's still, like, authentically you're being honest, you never mask to a point where I have to worry that what you're doing when you're masking is okay, now is this really what he means or is this really true? Like it's not it's still like genuine and authentic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, I
I don't
mean,
know.
and that comes from as an autistic person, we have a hard time being anything but genuine, being anything but honest. So And that's the thing. There's a lot of some people will think, oh, well, if you're masking, you're just being deceitful. You're just and that's not what it is.
No,
It's basically like we maybe even have already kind of tested out what's acceptable, and we'll just present that side of us. And it's not necessarily a disingenuous side. It's just that's the amount of ourselves or the side of ourselves that we're willing to put out there.
Yeah.
I have like when I turned 30, I had a birthday party, and this was when I was a firefighter, and it was also when I was still a Mormon, and we had firefighters and Mormons invited to my birthday party. And I realized, oh man, these are
very different
two completely different worlds of mine that I think, I definitely presented different masks to.
Yeah.
And it made me really nervous. Especially, I knew what some of those gifts I was going to get from the firefighters were. And I knew how my Mormon friends would.
Goofy they are, but yeah, inappropriate to some.
Yeah, and that's
get a little nervous.
Kind of like a good example of yep. There's different masks that I wear. They're not disingenuous, but they're very different. And bringing those two worlds together was definitely kind of nerve-wracking.
Yep.
Have you noticed like a difference from before my diagnosis versus after?
Just really not really a difference, but like just in awareness, like us being aware that, okay, certain situations require more effort. So we kind of navigate things differently. But I haven't really noticed like a change in you per se. Like we said, for many years, you've been kind of just authentically you at home. So I don't think I've noticed anything.
I think one thing that might be kind of a difference. I got diagnosed like just before my job change, just before we moved out here.
Mm-hmm.
And at my previous employer, I was pretty talkative with everybody. Most people in the room knew me. I was known for saying exactly how I felt about things. Everybody knew that I was going to say.
But they kind of over time grew to appreciate that about you.
Exactly. Yeah. And like one time I said something, and someone who was relatively new was almost taken aback, and I said, "It's okay, you'll get used to it. Being an asshole is part of my charm." And everyone just kind of chuckled at it. But at my current job, I'm a lot more quiet. Like, I work night shift, so that means that there's fewer people anyways. But I mean, where I work now, it's a much bigger room, a lot more people,
but they're a lot more spread out.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so, it's not a room I want to draw attention to myself in anyways.
Yeah.
And I don't.
But everybody kind of just works independently and does their jobs. And sometimes people will like talk amongst themselves, but it's like the 3 or 4 people sitting closest to you will have a conversation. It's not like on a large scale.
And even then, like, like once you've been working a shift for a certain amount of time, and we bid for shifts every year. So the people you work around might change every year, but generally you're working around the same people, and they've all kind of started to figure out that I'm a pretty quiet guy. I'll keep to myself mostly, but if they have something they want to talk to me about, ask me about, or whatever, like I'll talk with them.
Yeah.
But I'm probably not going to strike up a conversation, and I'm probably not going to engage in a small talk conversation for sure.
Yep.
So, I think that was definitely a big change. So what are some of the reasons for people masking? We kind of touched on it just by talking about it, but like one of them is just to be accepted in society. Like, you feel like you have to put on a mask or put on a show.
Be like everybody else, which turns into the mirroring. You're mimicking behaviors that you see from everybody else, conversations, just everyday things that you think, okay, this is what everybody else is doing, so this is what I have to do to fit in. Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, you do it to avoid prejudice or the stigma. There's a lot of stigma or misunderstanding about autism. For example, when I was still relatively new and also still reading more up on autism and stuff, I had a book called Unmasking Autism by Devon, I think it is. It's a good book. If you if you want to learn about masking and unmasking, that's a good
Mm-hmm.
book to actually check out. But one of my coworkers saw it and was like, "Oh, somebody you know have autism?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Oh, must be a really minor case." I was like, "Okay." And my response to him was, "No, it was a very masking case."
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of gave me this look like, "What?" Like he didn't understand what I was even
Yeah.
talking about. Um, but yeah, there's the stigma of it of, oh, well, you have a full-time job and you're doing fine, so it must
Yeah.
not be that much of an issue. And oh man, it is, because getting here created a lot of issues
Yeah.
for sure. Um, some of these, I basically copied them down, and some of them are pretty similar. Blending in or passing in a neurotypical world kind of
Mm-hmm.
goes along with society. Meeting social expectations.
Yeah. Which puts a lot of pressure on top of the effort to mask.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Um, this is a big one: hiding discomfort in environments that are not autism friendly.
Yeah.
Again, like uh, going shopping, going to parties or social events, um, yeah, anything like that. Like a lot of people will mask their discomfort, which just adds even more discomfort and more effort and more
Yeah.
exhaustion. Um, to to pull an example from the previous episode, that uses a lot more spoons.
Yeah. Well, and the very next item we're going to talk about is a lack of acceptance and accommodation for autistic characteristics.
Hmm.
I think this applies to actually a lot of like neurodivergence or like um we can apply this a lot in our lives, and it comes down to, and one of my favorite examples, and I'll try to be kind of general, is I had somebody that I knew that had really high anxiety, and one of their best friends was getting married, and this person knew about their anxiety and knew that it was going to be really, really hard for them to be in the situation of going to the wedding and being around all those people. So this person loving their friend and wanting them to be there for their special day made a separate room for that person to go to if they started having a lot of stress. So, like, when we love people and care about people, but we want them to be part of our lives, we can do little things like that. Like, how simple is it to set up a comfortable chair, a snack, and a drink, and kind of a quiet place for them to go that they know, hey, I love you and I want you to be here. Um, this is what I've set up for you to help you out to get you through this day because it's important to me and I know it's important to you to support me.
Hmm.
So I just thought that was a really cool way to accept and accommodate in those situations for
Yep.
people that we know and love.
Hmm.
Like we can bring in accommodations like that to include them more.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Another reason is to compensate for like the social and communication differences between autistics and non-autistics. Um, this we've kind of talked about before, and it's kind of a whole topic on its own,
Hmm.
communication styles. Um, a lot of people will say, "Oh, one of the deficits of autism is difficulty communicating." But then someone did a study where they put a bunch of autistics with neurotypicals in a room, see how well they communicate, and then they put a bunch of autistics just with each other and see how well they communicate. And it's not a difficulty communicating, it's a difference communicating,
Hmm.
because autistics get along and communicate very well with each other.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times if you find out that you're autistic and you go back and look at your friendships, you're like, yeah, they probably were too. And I've got a few friends that I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they are too. And like one of them uh, told me a while ago that he was also diagnosed,
Hmm.
either diagnosed or self-diagnosed, but he definitely
Yeah.
is. Coping with school or avoiding negative attention or punishment.
Yep.
Um, this was I was what was I doing? I was thinking about this or writing about this, but um, I was born and lived in California until I was 8. And then we moved to Texas, and I remember this was when I was in 3rd grade. We moved, In California, if you said yes, ma'am to your teacher, you were sassing her. And that was like, you got in trouble for that. And then we go to Texas, and one of my teachers asked me something, and I said, yeah. And she said, what? And I was like, yes. And she was like, yes, what? And I was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say next, because it felt like a trap. And, turns out you are expected to say yes, ma'am, in Texas. So I had to like adjust the mask, if you will,
Yeah.
to know what things I needed to say
It's
to
an
be
interesting
accepted.
example.
Because to me, yeah and yes ma'am are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of this, I wouldn't say lack of understanding, but lack of really understanding the importance of hierarchies.
Mm-hmm.
For neurodivergent people, there just doesn't have that same, I don't even know how to explain it. It doesn't have that same importance in our brain. For example, the last airline I worked for, the CEO would come in to the room often, and he knew me by name. I knew him by name.
Yeah.
And so he'd come in, and I'd just be like, hey, Dan. He'd be like, hey, Keith. And like other people were like, you guys like know each other really well? I was like, no, I know his name. He knows my name.
Yeah, right. Like you're
I
on a
say
first
hi.
name
He
basis.
says hi.
It turns out he puts his pants on one leg at a
Right.
time in the
He's
morning,
just
like
a
I
person.
do. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just, and it's not a matter of not giving respect where it's, earned or
It's
required, but it's just, it doesn't hold that special, like, kind of awe for us. This kind of goes along with what we were talking about, improving employment opportunities to keep jobs. This is something that a lot of people will give as an example to help neurotypical people understand masking, and that is, how do you act in a job interview? Like, 99% of people don't go into a job interview and just be their complete normal self, their everyday self. You're going to put on a professional tone and a professional look, and you want to come off professionally, and you're going to behave in that job interview in a way that you're not going to behave once you start doing that job, probably.
Right.
And it's not dishonest necessarily. It's just kind of the mask you feel like you need to put on in the moment. And
it's a good example.
Probably a good reason why a lot of people don't like job interviews. Maintaining friendships and relationships. We talked about, I think it was episode 2, about how like I've lost friendships because of how just direct I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I ever really masked that way, but I know that a lot of people will mask that kind of side of them because they don't want to lose friendships or relationships.
Yeah.
And then like the biggest one, it's just become routine or subconscious. And I think that's especially for late diagnosed people.
Yeah, I think
That's the
that's
biggest
kind of
thing.
what we're still trying to sort out, or you're still trying to sort out, and I'm still trying to like see, okay, what part of this was masking and what part of it was who you are, or even like who you've just become. Like sometimes I think if you do a certain mask all the time, every time for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it just becomes part of who you are anyways. So it's like,
and yeah, it may have started out as a mask, but it may have become just so second nature now that
that's easier.
It would take more effort to try to remove the mask than just keep it there, because it's just become who you are. Yeah, I definitely think that's a big part of it.
That's a journey for sure. The unmasking and figuring out what is masking and what's not. Especially in late diagnosis. I think that's been one of our biggest challenges, but I wouldn't say a challenge in a negative way. It's just been like the biggest question mark. Like,
I'm pretty conscious about some of the situations where I definitely mask in. Being in public in general, I definitely mask in. Being at work, even now, I work nights, so I don't have to interact with a lot of people. I don't have as much sensory overload, but there's still an element of masking there, even though I am more myself and just keep to myself and stay quiet. There's a little bit of masking stems, probably, for sure. I bring that, what is it called, an ice cube or whatever, an ice cube.
Nice cube. It's
like a little squishy thing.
Toy.
I always have that at my desk, and we'll like fiddle with that to kind of keep any other stimming down. this is probably like one of the topics that we're not going to be able to talk as much on because it's just we're still figuring it out ourselves.
Well, and it kind of seems like part of our life, really. Like, I'm thinking back to a conversation we had with one of, I think it was my attorney when we were trying to move to Minnesota, and we were having this meeting with him in the office, and you kind of became, like, animated about something, and you were like, because it was something that was, like, really important to us, and not upset or anything, but just, like, and he seemed concerned, and I remembered saying to him, "This is us talking and being honest with each other because this is an important situation, we need to know the truth, but the Keith that you'll see in the courtroom is not
Yeah.
like this. Like,
Yeah.
he very much
Oh, yeah.
stays professional, and it's more like an interview situation.
Mhm.
Like, you very much there's 2 sides of you, and we're in an office, and we're talking with, me, you, and an attorney that needs to know the situation. You're gonna be more
Yeah.
unmasked, like, this is just, like, let's throw the situation out there, that's how it is. I don't know, we're still just trying to figure out what's a mask and what's not, and what is like, what's just a normal situation where human behavior is different because of the circumstances
Right.
call for it.
Right. Well, like that just reminded me of when I was a firefighter and we'd go out on calls. I definitely think there's a bit of masking that every firefighter has to do anyways, where you have to kind of just shut off your emotions and deal
Yeah.
with the call. And I realized now that was definitely masking
Yeah.
for sure. Someone couldn't understand how I can be this way here and then turn around
Yeah.
and be different. And
And to you, it was like, that's just how it is.
yeah, that's just been my life.
I walk out
And
that door and the switch flips.
right.
Yeah.
But especially in that situation, again,
Yeah.
that's something where like all firefighters have to mask to
Yeah.
a certain extent.
I mean, you're people too. You have your own lives and everything going on, and then you have to walk out and help somebody else deal with the worst day of their life. So
Some of the strategies, this is one of those things that, there's strategies, but is it something that like there's always going to be masking, and it's not something that's inherently wrong, but it's inherently exhausting. So you want strategies to figure out maybe how to reduce masking. Some people think that we should be able to just completely unmask, and in an ideal world, we should be able to just be exactly who we are.
if an autistic person and their family are able to live in a world where they can completely unmask, great. Like, that's like each circumstance and situation is individual. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you're able to navigate that, I think most of us aren't.
Right.
So
Well, we don't live in a world, and this is going to almost sound political, but we don't live in a world where you can completely be yourself and be accepted, especially if that means that you're not providing some kind of monetary value to the system.
yeah.
What is considered a disability? Like, legally speaking, a disability is basically something that prevents you from providing some kind of
Yeah.
monetary value to the system, to capitalism. If you're not contributing to capitalism, then you're disabled, and that's, in my opinion, a problem.
Yeah.
Like, that you shouldn't have to earn the right to be who you are in our society.
Yeah. Definitely.
But the fact of the matter is that's just how it works. So
Right.
you can, and I'm not saying there's one right way or a wrong way to do it. If you're someone who you want to be able to completely unmask and be exactly who you are, then that's fine. Unfortunately, that's probably going to come with some consequences in our society that aren't fair, but
Yeah.
that's,
I think that most people tend to choose the path of least resistance, which is somewhere in the middle.
yeah.
Kind of like
And
where
that's
we are.
that's kind of where we've fallen. I've definitely, getting to where we are, had to do really high masking and had to really push through some really overwhelming situations. I was working 3 jobs and going to school full time,
Yeah.
when we were trying to get here, and kind of glad I didn't have a diagnosis yet.
Didn't know
then what I know
Yeah.
now, because knowing what I know now, that I don't have to do that,
Yeah.
it would be that much harder,
Right.
for sure.
I look back at those days and don't know how we navigated it, but here we are. So it's like things worked out, but it's definitely a
We
challenge.
put in our time
so.
and put in the effort, and anyone who knows our situation now and says must be nice. Well, yeah, it is nice, and we definitely earned it. So,
Yeah.
like,
We work for it. We definitely work for it. And
Yeah.
that's another thing that we've said to each other over the years is like we've kind of gone back and forth as to like who works more, who earns more money, or like who's able to do what. And we kind of have each other's backs on that. It's like we put in the same amount of effort. It's not about the dollar amount on the
Yeah.
bottom line or the results that we're getting out of the effort. We're both putting in the same amount of effort.
Yeah.
So that's
So some of these strategies, though, that they talk about, one is just allowing time to recover after social interactions. So
Yeah.
situations where like there's almost no choice but to mask.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta allow some extra time to recover because, again, as I've said before, and it sounds melodramatic, it is exhausting to mask. And when you've lived a life of masking and not realizing you're masking and wondering why you're so exhausted, once you learn that that's what you're doing and you don't always have to, it becomes almost more difficult
Yeah.
to do it. You can use energy accounting, and this is kind of similar to spoon theory,
Yeah.
where you
Kind of like budgeting your
budgeting
energy.
your energy and paying
Mhm.
attention to, okay, what am I going to be able to accomplish today? Like realize what is, an acceptable limit to put on yourself.
Yeah.
And there are some days where I'm like, I'm exhausted and I get one thing done and I'm like, you know what? That's more than I even thought I'd be able to get done. So that's good. Like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to budget your own energy
Yeah.
and
And
limit
set
what you're going to
realistic
do.
expectations.
Yeah.
Don't expect too much of yourself. Like start small and then as you kind of learn, it's just like doing a family financial budget. Like
Mm-hmm.
you start out and the first month or two is like just getting all the numbers in order. It's not going to
Yeah.
be perfect for the first little while, and then you figure out kind of how things work and you can budget better. It's energy accounting is no different.
Yeah.
Like you kind of learn different situations and how much you need to plan for and what you can do afterwards or before to make it work.
Yeah.
And it's just a learning process.
Well, and I think something that is definitely really important is understanding that you have a right to do that.
Yeah.
You have a right to set limits for yourself. You have a right to say, this is what I can do and this is what I'm going to do. When I was growing up, like it was taught to me I didn't have a right. I didn't have a right to decide what I wanted to do. I didn't have a right to express how I really felt about things. I masked a lot growing up because I was forced to.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is how you're going to behave. This is how you're going to react. This is how you're going to handle these situations. So I just had to. And it's important, especially as a adult autistic, to know that you have the right to set your own limits and to set your own boundaries. And if it's too much, if it's going to take too much energy, if it's going to require you to mask too much, you have a right to say no.
But no, you're right. It's setting those boundaries is okay and knowing what your limits are, knowing your abilities. Like don't sell yourself short, but it's okay to set those limits. And yeah, definitely.
I just like talking about this. One of the other masks that I think I used to wear was this, going along with this notion that you always have to be looking to move up.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should always be looking to better yourself.
Advance.
And I think you should be better in yourself, but not that you should be better in yourself, again, to be more of a contribution to the economy than anything. So like, I'm at a point now, like I am in the job that I was working towards for the last almost decade now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm good. Like,
yeah, just we don't have to.
I make a good, comfortable wage. I enjoy the job that I have. I am fine with where I'm at. And like, I understand now that that's okay to say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is like, I'm not trying to move up anymore. I'm not trying to advance further up the ladder. I have no problem doing exactly what I'm doing for the next 20 years.
Yes.
Like that's okay because it works for me.
Right.
So
kind of seems like a mentally very healthy place to be.
Yeah.
And
after
being
years
there is
of
kind of
after years of stress and anxiety, and I was watching a video last night at work by a guy who wrote. I sent you a link to his book. I don't remember what his book is called now, but
I don't remember either.
A guy named Sol Smith was talking about how when we're constantly in these states of overwhelm, our brain is and our body's just swimming with cortisol, which is the stress hormone,
Mm-hmm.
and that contributes to a lot of chronic illnesses, chronic pain, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I spent decades swimming in that, dealing with that. And so now that I'm in a spot where it's a lot more chill, I'm a lot more relaxed, I'm comfortable where I'm at, like I'm good. Like,
Yeah. I can just stay here career-wise and be comfortable and then focus my energy on doing things I enjoy outside of work.
mhm,
Like
for sure.
that's, yeah.
Again, having a diagnosis or even recognizing it through your, self-diagnosis
hmm
definitely helps you start to understand your masks. I think this is one of the things that takes the longest
Yeah.
to work through
I
for
think it's kind of a
people.
never-ending process,
Yeah,
really. I don't think this will ever.
for sure. Spending time with other autistic people. Again, like we said when we were talking about communication, autistic people communicate better generally with each
Yeah.
other.
It's like
And
a
so
different
just,
language without being a different
yeah.
language. Yeah.
And one of those things is parallel play.
Yeah.
If you can hang out with either loved ones or other autistic people and you're both just doing your own thing, but you're in the same room together, there's a sense of comfort that comes with that.
Yeah.
Thinking about who you are behind the mask, like what your real likes and dislikes are, how and when you can unmask to kind of better show your true self.
hmm
I think that this is maybe one of the things that, like I said, this is kind of the most difficult thing. In my case, I think there's been like at home, I've mostly been unmasked.
hmm
So I think like I've always kind of realized when the mask's on, when it's not most of the time.
Yeah.
Just not knowing that that's what it is,
Yeah.
that it's an actual mask.
I think the most time that the mask has shown at home is maybe in parenting situations,
Yeah.
but not, like I said, not in a bad way. It's just like, okay, I need to deal with this important thing, and
Yeah.
this person needs me to be a certain way versus how I really want to be
Right.
right now.
Right.
So you will do what your kids
Mm-hmm.
need of you in that moment, and I think that's really the
Yeah.
only mask that I've seen within
Well,
home.
like, and even having to deal with like stuff outside the home,
Mhm.
but like still from home, like having to make phone calls and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's definitely big masking. I hate talking on the phone with people I don't know. I do it at work plenty. I definitely did it a lot when I worked in emergency services.
Yeah.
But I can do it at work because I'm getting paid to do it. And, like it is what it is. I really, really hate it when I have to like call and make doctor's appointments and stuff. And a
Mhm.
lot of times I'll lean on you to do that for me. Sometimes I'll try to reach out and make doctor's appointments. And if one or two things goes wrong with that, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I need you to make the appointment or it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Again, just identifying what your masks are and what they aren't and who you are behind the mask is probably the most difficult
Yeah.
to deal with when you're especially a late diagnosed person. Like I said before, you've been masking for 40 years. It becomes really difficult to understand what's a mask, what's not. What started out as a mask and is now
Mhm.
just you because that's just how you've been
Right.
trained or how you've trained yourself
Yeah, it's what you've become.
to be. The biggest thing that I think is important is to understand, is this draining your energy?
Yeah.
If it's draining your energy, it's still a mask.
Yeah.
If it's because it's not coming naturally enough to you
Yeah.
to not exhaust you. And that's something that you got to pay attention to. And one way to better identify that is journaling. Like I've tried this several times
Mhm.
and I never stick to it for very long. But journaling can help you understand, how you're feeling when you're doing things,
Mhm.
how you deal with situations, all that kind of stuff. And it
Yeah.
puts it down in an easy to reference form to help you understand it. You
Yeah.
look back and look over a couple of days and realize, okay, I did this. It seemed to come naturally, but it exhausted me. So maybe that's not as natural as it may have seemed because it became habit and routine for you,
Mhm.
but it's still masking.
Yeah.
Other things to do is meditating. And I've gotten into like mindfulness meditation. Try to do that sometimes. It kind of comes and goes. Sometimes I am really good about trying to do a mindful meditation once a day, and then other times I go months. And
Yeah. Just kind of being present in your own mind and your own thoughts, and
Mhm.
just giving yourself time to clear your head and actually
Yeah,
process whatever is. Yeah.
for sure. And then going to therapy, having a
Yeah.
therapist is
Yep.
always, I think that's a good idea for everybody,
I do too. And
and
I
especially in this case.
I recommend it for people who don't think they have anything going on in life. Like, establish a therapist that you have them get to know you, because when something happens is not the moment you want to be figuring that out in.
Yeah, for sure.
So
The difficulty with that is insurance.
I know
Insurance
insurance
wants
and
you,
yep,
they want the therapist to diagnose your issue, and then they want you to
a
be
treatment plan
working on a
and
treatment plan. Yep.
what's your release date. And
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely adds a challenge to things. So
Mhm. So how can you support a neurodivergent who's masking? And you've got more than one in your life.
yeah, I just try to make you feel safe and comfortable in the situation. Um, if it's a masking situation where you're putting in a lot of effort to be something that you're not, and I mean, telling them, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but just like honest conversations, communication, um, and stepping in to help where you can, but
Hmm.
mainly understanding. Um, I think after the fact in high masking situations, can't tell you how many times I've said to you, just do something stimmy. Like,
Hmm.
just take this time for yourself and just do something stimmy.
Yeah. Well, you
So
just told me that, was it yesterday or
last
the night
night,
before? It was
yep,
last night. Like, because you knew I was still struggling with some things, and if you saw one of my videos that I posted about
yeah,
how the other night was just a tough one, yeah, you just gotta take some time and
yeah.
do
Well, I knew
something
you had to go to
stimmy,
work
find
last
something to,
night, and I didn't want you to be stressing about, oh, I need to do laundry and I need
yeah,
to do this and I need to do that around the house, and oh, let's get the dishes done before I go to work. And then you're worn out and stressed out when you get to work. And it's like, you know what? Forget about all that stuff. I'll take care of it when I get home. Just do something stimmy until you have to go to work.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And that's always, it's helpful to know that, I mean, neither of us has ever been like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that.
right.
But it's always a nice reassurance of, just relax, I've got this.
Yeah.
Um, Educational professionals better understanding this. I made like a meme about this but it's true. Like our son, who is ADHD, probably a little bit of autism there too. And
Somewhere on the spectrum. Yeah.
we had an IEP meeting, and the vice principal, like not realizing how it comes off, said, "Oh well, we're all a little autistic." Like, no, we're not all a little autistic.
Yeah.
Like, if everyone was a little autistic, the world would be made for autistic people,
Right.
and it's not. We
It'd be a
wouldn't be
lot
having
more
to have an
accommodating.
right. We wouldn't be having to have an IEP meeting if we were all a little autistic.
Maybe you are, and that's why you think it's normal and everybody
Right.
is. You're just going along with the flow and masking
Right.
like you think everybody, like, that's really what it's all about.
Well, and that's, it's like another meme that I made when your parent says, "Well, I do that and I'm not autistic." Well, I got news
Maybe.
for you. Clinicians being aware that some autistic people might mask during the diagnostic process.
Yeah,
That is,
I think that's one of the challenges they have with adult diagnosis is
mhm,
adults at that point have usually become so efficient at masking that
mhm.
the testing process is hard and it has to be adapted quite a bit.
Right. Well, they ask, "Oh, do you have difficulty with this thing that most autistic people have difficulty with?" And it's like, no, I'm 40 something. I've
Had to
figured out how
figure
to
it
deal
out.
with it.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I do, and
Yeah.
but I've had to figure out strategies to deal with
Yeah.
it. So it doesn't seem like a difficulty to me anymore.
Mhm.
I just have figured it out
Yeah.
for sure. And then public spaces and events, it would be nice if they became more autism friendly. And it doesn't mean like, oh, go to a rock concert and the music has to be quiet, But like my sister will take her son to events, and they have like earmuffs that he can put on if it's too loud. He loves
Yeah.
going, like they've gone to like monster truck shows
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and he loves it, but he still wants to wear the
The ear protection.
ear protection to kind of
Like you
just
wear when you
reduce
go
the sound.
shooting kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we talked about too some stores that have sensory friendly
Mhm.
shopping hours,
The lighting, the music, the
having quiet spaces.
Yep.
Like, I think that would be the biggest thing, is if you have some kind of event where just by its nature, it could be overstimulating. There's nothing wrong with that. But it would be nice if there were like some place that people who are sensory sensitive
Yeah.
could at least go to get out of it for a little.
Right. You know that there's an escape. And in those situations, you might not even use the escape. Just knowing it's there is your
Mhm.
security blanket.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, everybody's sensory sensitivities are different because, like you joked about, when I had an acoustic drum set
Yeah.
and I would play that overwhelmed you. That was way too much for you. But for me, like, I love it. It was loud,
Yeah.
but loud by itself isn't the problem for me. Loud and chaotic is the
Yeah.
problem. That's why I can blast music and like love it. But if I walk into a really noisy, busy store, it's like, no.
Yeah.
If all the loud noises are like working together and can be easily, like organized, then yeah, that doesn't bother me. But when it's just chaos, that's the problem.
Yeah. It's very interesting, the
Yep.
differences. Yep.
So again, I don't think this is going to be quite as long an episode because
No,
I
it
don't
might be
know.
closer to my 30 to 45
Yeah,
minutes
might
that I
be.
predicted in our opening episode.
Yeah. Again, this is something we're still learning about. We're still trying to understand. Probably make me want to go back and reread Devon Price's book and other things to just better understand this again, because it definitely is the biggest thing that I'm still working on.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've heard expressed a lot in support groups from the non-autistic partner or even an autistic partner for a late diagnosed person, like one of the biggest fears is when the mask comes off, who am I left with? And it's a process, and it's again something that you kind of work through together, but um it's a real fear for both sides, and it's scary for the autistic person taking off that mask because that's what they've gotten used to and known their whole life. So even though it requires a lot of effort, it's still scary.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I think is important to say, unmasking is not an excuse to be a jerk. It's not an
No.
excuse to treat people badly. So, like, and I don't think someone who's truly unmasking is going to suddenly go into that. So, like, if you've got an autistic partner and you're worried about their unmasking, I don't think that's as much of a worry. But if they say they're unmasking and that makes them a jerk, and like they genuinely are being a jerk and basically like, I don't care how you feel about what I'm saying or doing, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it definitely is something that needs to be addressed. Either they weren't really masking, they were just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it is not an excuse to be a jerk.
No. And like in healthy relationships, and if you're communicating and like my wants and needs too. So if you unmasking something means neglecting one of my needs, you don't want to do that. It's like that's the meeting in the middle and finding the middle ground. I obviously don't want you to mask and make yourself uncomfortable, but you also respect my wants and needs. So
again, in our situation, I think most of the time you got the genuine me anyways.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to worry. I understand why that was a concern at first, but I think as we went along, you realized, no, he's pretty much been genuine.
Yeah.
There might be like some really goofy stuff. Like I've always told you, when I'm driving home from work by myself, I'm probably the goofiest. There's probably a lot more echolalia kind of stuff going on when I'm listening to songs or whatever. But even when we're driving together, I sometimes will do that. So, yeah. Okay. Any other final thoughts?
Not really. Just ongoing process. Like be patient, be understanding, and again, set those boundaries. Like you said, it's not an excuse to be a jerk or mistreat somebody, but also like be true to yourself and take some time and really figure it out so that everybody can be happier and more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, this is not an event. You don't unmask and here I am. No matter how long you've been masking, no matter how late you were diagnosed, it's an ongoing process. It's kind of like starting to peel the mask off and figure out what's mask and what's your face.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like you've got to figure out what's you and what isn't, and be true to yourself, but don't think that means, oh well, it's exhausting to not be a jerk, so I'm going to be a jerk. Like,
it's like the old man syndrome. When you get to a certain age, you can just say whatever you want because you just let all those filters go. It's not like that. I mean, you still have to be respectful of other people.
And if anyone has any feedback on masking, your own experiences, how they differ from ours, whether you can relate, anything, leave us some comments wherever you can comment, whether it's on our YouTube video or I think you can leave comments on some of the sites where you get podcasts. If nothing else, I know you can on Podbean. That's where our podcast is hosted and distributed from. So if nothing else, check us out there and leave us some comments and let us know.
I'd be interested to hear more feedback on experiences from people who were not late diagnosed, like what their masking looks like and how it's changed over the years. So, I mean, if you have something to contribute, let us know. And
there's, it's like we've said, there's such a various stories, I'm sure, out there, because every autistic person is different. Mm-hmm. So everyone's masking story and what they do, there's going to be similarities, but there's going to be a lot of differences out there too, for sure. Okay.
Cool. Well, like, subscribe, share this episode with others. And next week, we're going to be talking about special interests. So we'll look forward to seeing you.
Yep. And with that, I guess we'll say goodbye for this week.
Okay.
See you.
Have a good week.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.